Hello, in this video I want to talk a bit about some high-level concepts and breaking down ideas that will be reiterated throughout the course. The ultimate goal for me in this class is to teach you guys the process of creating an appealing character in a production-friendly way. That will give us not only a good project to show in the end, but also I want to instill some pretty important ideology that will help you all become a better artist. It is very difficult to create an appealing character without understanding the principle of art, and there are many elements we have to juggle with, from the look of it to the actual production process of it. So let's start with the look of it, and go back to the drawing board for a second and understand the elements of art and principles of art and how we can apply to our 3D projects. So the elements of art are pretty self-explanatory. We deal with them when we're little kids. When we start drawing, we produce line and shape. And now I'm going to talk about them in a more 3D form. So when we see a silhouette of a character, we are basically judging the outline of the sculpture and the shape of it. And our form is the volume of the sculpture itself. How the form reacts with light source gives us value, and the composition of the sculpture gives us space. You have color and texture that we deal with during texturing when we make diffuse maps and roughness maps or normal maps that describes surface quality. Then we move on to principles of art that are a bit more abstract. We have balance, which is the symmetry or asymmetry of a piece. When a sculpture has great balance, it gives us viewers a sense of stability. It doesn't look like the sculpture is going to tip over. Contrast is the tension created from two elements. It might be dark and light, it could be smooth or rough surface. It's important because contrast draws the eye. It calls for attention, so we put a lot of contrast in focal points of a character. Next we have movement, which is the sense of direction. It can be achieved by the gesture of the character, it can be achieved by patterning on the costume, or any other arrangements of the elements. Proportion is the scale of things. For us character artists, we think of proportion in an anatomical sense and also in character design. Stylized characters have really exaggerated proportion. A melee character might have huge shoulders and it's paired with really slim lower body. And in costumes, when we deal with patterning, coloring, we use quote-unquote like good proportions commonly because it occurs a lot in nature and it's aesthetically pleasing to look at. So, for example, we have a character with a costume that has 1/3 of the area in bright saturated color, and the other 2/3 will contrast that by having saturated values to show some type of interest. Next we have gradation, which is the gradual change in value in color or in texture form. It could be anything. It's related to harmony, which is the pleasing feeling. When we look at two similar elements in adjacent to each other, it shows that they belong together, they have a relationship, and it is the opposite of contrast. Rhythm is a designed patterning of a repetition of the same element. So when we look at a lot of fantasy character concept arts, they're wearing fantasy armors that have very dramatic shape language, and the concept artists usually repeat that same language throughout the whole body to show that the armor set is cohesive. Variety is related to contrast, and it's a use of varying elements to break up monotonous areas. It can be different color, it can be different shape. It's a great way to fight a boring sculpture. So if you are still not quite familiar with all of these terms, I would suggest that you start to familiarize yourself with them, know what they mean, and then use them in critiques. This is important for your own work and for professional settings, when in meetings you're reviewing your own work or you're reviewing other people's work in progress, you cannot just blurb out things like, this looks great, I like it, or this sucks and I don't like it. You should always delineate your train of thoughts and explain what you're trying to say. And through using these terminologies, you can give out better criticisms and you can give out more constructive comments. So we come to the second part of appeal, taste, and perception. Everybody can appreciate great works of art, and when something is done beautifully, we can tell right away. I believe that we can create appealing pieces of art regardless of subject matter, as long as we keep in mind the principle of art and apply them correctly. So you have to know the rules to break the rules. A perfect example of this is Simon Lee, who is a sculptor and he's a master. His 20 Days of Monsters features grotesque creatures, and the subject matter is definitely not considered attractive in the traditional sense. But if you look at all of his sculpture, they have great movement. They're dynamic and they're wonderfully done. Some people might attribute mistakes or poor choices to their style, but style comes from years of perfecting the craft, and it is a personal filtration of information. Style is the way you show how you perceive the world. If you look at Loish's work, she is a well-known illustrator and her style is instantly recognizable. But if you look at her older works, it looked just like any other illustrator's work. It is through years of experience and years of perfecting her skills was she able to create an iconic imagery that everybody can recognize as her own.